Today, we're diving into a text that lays out a very specific blueprint for building sexual tension. The source material basically gives a step-by-step guide on how, in the author's view, you can steer an interaction from just friendly into something more. So let's break down these techniques.
So the source text kicks things off with this central idea. It argues that most guys fall into one of two traps. Either they're way too direct and aggressive, or they're so passive they end up squarely in the friend zone. The whole point of the techniques we're about to explore is to find that middle path, a way to build attraction using subtlety and, well, confidence.
All right, here's the game plan for this breakdown. We're going to start with the foundation, which the text calls silent tension. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the nonverbal cues it recommends. After that, we'll see how to build what it calls the physical and verbal bridge with both touch and words. And finally, we'll get into the source's ideas on controlling the whole dynamic.
The main argument here is that real tension isn't about big, dramatic gestures. Nope, it's built through a bunch of small, totally controlled actions. The goal, as the text describes it, is to create this little subconscious shift in the other person's mind, taking their perception of you from just, oh, he's nice, to something that has a very clear, flirty undercurrent. So, how do you actually do this? How do you build this tension? Well, the text says it all starts with your first set of tools, nonverbal cues. According to this source, your body language does all the heavy lifting before you even say anything significant. This whole section is about what your body is communicating when your mouth is shut.
Okay, step one is all about eye contact. But look, it's not just about, looking at someone. The text suggests holding their gaze for just a second or two longer than what feels totally normal. That tiny little extension is meant to be the first signal that, hey, this interaction is a little bit different. And here it is. This is the key move in the whole sequence. After you hold that slightly longer eye contact, the advice is to briefly, and I mean really briefly, let your eyes drop down to her lips. It's pretty amazing how this one tiny action is framed as this huge nonverbal suggestion. And then you bring your gaze right back up to her eyes. The source claims this three-part sequence, eyes to lips, back to eyes, is an incredibly potent combination. It's supposed to communicate attraction without you saying a single word, creating this moment of just silent, charged energy. So why the big emphasis on this specific eye movement? The text boils it down to these three things. The effect is a quiet kind of attraction, it creates a subconscious shift in how she sees the moment, and it supposedly works because it's a primal, subtle signal that flies right under the radar of conscious thought. Okay, moving on from the eyes, the source talks about your voice. It breaks it down really simply. A lower-pitched voice tends to be associated with dominance and authority, while speaking slowly comes across as more sensual and confident. The advice here is to just let your words breathe, using pauses to make the other person actually lean in and listen a little closer. The last nonverbal piece the text brings up is something it calls stillness. And this is all about getting rid of nervous energy, no fidgeting, no tapping, no jerky movements. The source argues that being calm and controlled in how you move projects this powerful confidence. It even specifically frames it as a reflection of a firm, grounded masculinity.
All right, so we've got the nonverbal foundation set. Now the text moves on to how you actually bridge the distance, both with your body and your words. This is all about making that leap from silent signals to actual, direct, though still subtle, interaction. So the text suggests breaking this so-called touch barrier with moves that are super casual, confident, and totally socially okay. Things like guiding her through a doorway with a hand on her back, gently brushing a piece of lint off her shoulder, or giving her a playful tap on the arm when she makes a joke. The key idea here is that these are little tests for comfort and openness. Now we're getting to the verbal stuff. The source suggests using phrases that have a bit of a double meaning. This first one, "You're trouble, aren't you?" is presented as a kind of playful challenge. It's a flirty way of saying, I find you really intriguing and maybe a little dangerous, without having to spell it out.
And here's another one, asking, "Is this how you usually get what you want?" Again, it works on two different levels. On the surface, it's just a question. But underneath, it creates this fun, challenging vibe, a mental game, as the text puts it. It implies that you see her charm, but you're also totally captivated by it. And this one perfectly demonstrates the final verbal technique, direct insinuation. A line like this is designed to be intentionally vague, but super suggestive. The source claims the goal isn't to be crude, but to spark her imagination and get her mind racing about what you could possibly be thinking. Okay, for our final section, the text gets into some more advanced ideas. This isn't just about single actions anymore. It's about managing the entire energy and the pacing of the interaction to really crank up the tension.
This right here, this is the question the source claims she'll be asking herself if you pull up the next technique correctly. The whole idea is to create a moment that's so charged that she actually has to stop and think, whoa, what is happening between us right now?
And the answer is silence. The text advises using strategic pauses in your conversation. For instance, after she answers a kind of deep question, instead of jumping right in with a reply, you just hold her gaze and say nothing for a beat. That little bit of silence, according to the source, makes the emotional intensity of the moment just shoot through the roof. This last technique is a really interesting two-step dance, mirror and break. So first, you build rapport. You subtly mirror her energy, her gestures. You're creating a connection. But right when that comfort level is at its peak, you break the pattern with a confident leading move. The goal, according to the source, is to unexpectedly shift the dynamic and take charge.
So, as we wrap things up, you can see that every single technique we've gone over in this text really just boils down to 3 fundamental principles. First, subtlety. All these actions are designed to work just beneath the surface. Second is control. Control of your body, your voice, and the pace of the whole interaction. And finally, confidence, which is really the foundation that makes all the other stuff work.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. After breaking down all these very deliberate, very calculated techniques, it brings up a pretty fascinating question. Is that electric tension between two people something that's artificially built through skill and technique? Or is it just the natural result of a genuine connection being allowed to come to the surface? Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for joining this breakdown.